So I suppose there are really three types of behaviors that animals, plants can have, mostly animals. Innate behavior, learned behavior, and social behavior. We'll talk about each of the three. Let's talk about innate behavior first. So innate behavior simply means that which you are born with. We've already talked about one type, which is reflexes. So we talked about the 5 parts of the reflex arc. The two I want to talk about today are a little more involved, are taxis and kinesis. Um, Taxis and kinesis are best seen in, oh, I hesitate to use the word, but simpler organisms. I mean, obviously, we all have taxis and kinesis, but it's easier to see in simple things. So let's take a look, first of all, at what we're talking about here, stimuli. So we've already defined this term. So what is a stimuli? A change of environment which will be detected by receptors. So what could be the change of environment? Well, there's a ton of stuff. I just put a short list down here just to let you know the prefixes, right? So geo means gravity, magneto means magnetic, hydro, water or humidity, thermo is temperature, photo is light, chemo is kind of a broad term. Nutrients could be sugar, could be pH, could be, I suppose, oxygen, carbon dioxide. Osmo means salt. Baro refers to blood pressure. Electro means electrical field, and there's a host of all other things, right? So we're first of all going to talk about taxis. So if I had something that was a taxis that responded to a light receptor, I would call it phototaxis. So that's kind of how the system works. So let's define this type of innate behavior, taxis. So what do I mean by that? A change in direction in response to a stimuli. So we have to actually see the organism change its direction. So I've given you a couple of examples right here. So let's look at phototaxis, right? Well, moths, any sort of insects, and everyone knows if you put up a light at night, a bunch of insects, they fly right over to it. This is the basis, of course, for the bug zapper. You turn it on at night, they all go to it and get zapped right away. Big mistake. Hey, we also know that plants respond to light. So we've seen auxin. We've seen that hormone, right? Which causes plants to tilt towards the sunlight, right? So we've seen that before. That would be phototaxis. Hey, by the way, I don't know if this matters all that much, but if it goes towards the stimuli, it's positive. If it goes the other way, it'd be negative. So some things actually, when they're hit with a stimuli, they go away from it, right? So a lot of things would retreat from heat, for example. Some things would go towards it. Here's another example, chemo. Ants, boy, as my wife has told me, you leave a little piece of food on the floor in the kitchen at night. In the morning, you see there's a straight line of insects. They just changed direction and they all went straight to it. Bacteria obviously do the same thing too. Magneto. Yeah, we don't particularly respond to the magnetic field. We don't sense it, but there are a lot of animals that do. I recently saw a Shark Week special that sharks actually respond to a magnetic field. They will not cross over a line of magnets. We've always wondered about carrier pigeons, right? So one of the questions that came up in the IB test a few years ago was, you take a bunch of birds, you set them free in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. How do they find their way back to their home in Oregon? And they put little GPS trackers on their little feet, the little wings and so forth, and they set them loose there and they tracked them. And originally, so when they're in the middle of the ocean, right? Originally, they're wandering around, they don't know where to go, and then they kind of figure it out, and they head straight across the Pacific Ocean back to home. So how do they do that? What was the answer to the question? Well, a lot of people put down there, well, sunlight or starlight, but that doesn't make sense. I mean, you can see they have a straight line here at night, so it couldn't be the sun. A straight line in the day, so it couldn't be stars. A lot of people said wind current, but the wind chains around, so that doesn't really work. But the answer, of course, was the magnetic field. So magnetic field is constant, right? And that's how birds, particularly carrier pigeons, can find their way back. I mean, they're not looking at maps, checking roads and things and islands and so forth. Hey, the same thing takes place in field mice. If you take a field mouse and you take them way on over to the other side of the field and kind of swing them around and get them all mixed up, they'll be disoriented for a minute and then they head right back to where they came from. They can recognize their position on the magnetic field. The other type of innate behavior I want to talk about is kinesis. So that's slightly different. It means non-directional change in intensity. So they don't move to any particular way, but they change their intensity. They become more active or less active. What's some good examples of that? So hydrokinesis responds to water. Woodlouse, this guy right here, or what we know as roly-polies or pill bugs, these are the guys always found under logs, right? You lift up a log and they go crazy. They respond to water. So the more water, the more active they are. And then there's photokinesis, and a good example of that is brine shrimp. So if you're growing a tank of brine shrimp and you turn on the light, they all start buzzing like a swarm, something out of a SpongeBob movie, and they become really active. That would be positive photokinesis. Okay, that sounds like a good start for our understanding of types of innate behavior.